Hello, everyone. My name is Kara Seffel, and I'm the Dietetic and Nutrition Intern with GBS Health and Wellness. And today we'll learn how to feed a healthy family by building a healthy relationship with food. Okay, so for today's agenda, we'll cover establishing a routine. We'll go over some mealtime boundaries, such as the division of responsible feeding, sticking to a schedule, serving the right foods, serving the right amount of foods, making food fun, family meals, and then we'll provide you with some resources. So mealtime can be stressful for the caregiver, and the caregiver can be the parent, the grandparent, any family member or friend, just anyone that takes care of the child. And so mealtime can be stressful not only for that caregiver person, but also for the child. Today, we will discuss some mealtime boundaries to help make mealtime more peaceful and set up a child for lifelong healthy eating habits. So establishing a regular feeding routine is essential for building healthy habits into adulthood. The child's dietary habits are primarily established between ages 1 and 2, so it's important to start early. Shaping eating habits early can help the child make healthy eating decisions when they have more autonomy in adolescence. So a healthy relationship with food can decrease the risk of negative body image and disordered eating, which can develop at any age, especially it can happen at an early age. So a good feeding routine includes reduced grazing, also called frequent snacking, increasing exposure to new foods, and setting a good example by modeling healthy eating. So the basis of positive meal times with the child involves the establishment of some mealtime boundaries. It's the caregiver's job to establish and keep the following boundaries to help the child learn routine around food. So it's not the caregiver's job to cater to the child's every food desire. Catering to the child's requests will discourage them from trying new foods. It's imperative, especially for toddlers, to try various foods in this stage to gain needed nutrients and expand their comfort level around different flavors, smells, textures, and appearances in their food. So caregivers should stick to this division of responsible feeding. So in the division of responsible feeding, it's a concept that promotes allowing the child to determine the amount of food that their body needs. So the caregiver decides which foods are served, when the foods are served, and where the child eats, while the child is in charge of deciding what to eat from the plate and how much to eat. So if a caregiver has been restricting what the child eats, it may take several weeks for the child to sense this natural hunger and fullness in their body, and they may consume a large amount of foods that were restricted at first, but eventually they will regulate their intake. Remember that these changes don't happen overnight. So if this is a new concept, don't expect it to go perfectly right away. Sticking to this division of responsible feeding over time will really help create more of a positive feeding environment for you and the child. So life is chaotic and it's busy, but try to stick to a feeding schedule as much as possible. So by the time the child is about 2 years old, they should be consuming 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day, allowing 2 to 3 hours between eating occasions and reducing those grazing behaviors between the meals with both solid foods as well as liquid snacks as well. Setting a schedule creates a predictable routine that kids can rely on as they learn to listen to their body's hunger and fullness cues. A schedule reduces grazing on snack foods and sugary drinks between the meals, and grazing can displace healthful foods and dull those senses of hunger and fullness in the child. And remember, these snacks are going to vary depending on the age of the child. A younger child has a smaller stomach, so they might need more snacks. As well, if you have an adolescent teen who's growing a lot, they might need a few more snacks. So that's why it's really important to have the child understand to listen to their own body cues of if they're hungry or if they're full. So only serving foods that the child likes will only increase picky eating. Persistent exposure to new foods is key to becoming familiar with the new foods and eventually trying them. Children are often fearful or cautious of trying new foods, and this fear does not necessarily reflect picky eating. Children prefer familiar things, including familiar foods. So increased exposure to many types, textures, tastes, and smells can help mitigate the fear of new food through familiarization. It's important to pair a food that's enjoyed or liked, also called a safe food, with a food that could be new to the child or one that's not their favorite. This can help the child eventually learn to associate a food that they like with a new food, which will increase their intake. So to summarize, don't become a short order cook for your child. Portion sizes also affect the amount of food the child consumes. When we condition children to larger than needed portion sizes, we can increase intake, especially for sugary, salty, and high-fat foods. Ensuring proper portion sizes and teaching the division of responsibility in feeding can help foster a positive relationship with food and maintain a healthy weight. For individualized recommendations, check out myplate.gov for their specific recommendations based on the child's age, gender, and activity level. So this is going to vary a lot, even within one family from child to child, depending on what rate of growth they're in, how much sleep they've had, their appetite, and the amount of physical activity that they get every day. But we do know that consistently serving larger portion sizes than is necessary can lead to overeating. So it's normal for a child to be a little bit fearful of new foods, and this fear doesn't necessarily reflect a picky eater. Kids tend to prefer familiar things, like we said. So increased exposure to many types, textures, smells, and shapes of food can help mitigate this picky eating and decrease this fear of new food by familiarizing. And there's several ways to increase this exposure to new foods. Plating a small bite of the new food with the safe food or the liked food, as I mentioned, can increase this exposure of that food and reduce the fear around the new food. And that increases the chances that the child will eventually taste that food, which is the goal. So additionally, the new food, it becomes associated with that preferred foods and becomes something that they will eventually accept. So getting kids in the kitchen to help cook also helps them to learn to touch and feel foods and gets them invested in trying what they've helped to make. Gardening shows kids how food is grown and garners excitement to try the fruits of their labor. Even books and games that involve food can also increase exposure in a neutral environment through associative learning. And lastly, having kids set the table gets them involved in the meal that can help de-escalate fear. And this repeated food exposure, not the association with social or token rewards, is what can increase acceptance of a disliked food. So you can see some of these fun food ideas in this chart, such as making food critters, making bite art with your teeth, using cookie cutters to make food into fun shapes, pizza art, self-portraits, etc. There are many ways that you can make food a little bit more fun, as long as it doesn't get out of control and start to involve bad behaviors such as throwing food. But any kind of tactile play with food is going to help de-escalate some of that fear. So family meals should be established at the table. The caregiver should sit with the child during the meal rather than multitask. This can help model that good behavior. Eating different foods from the child also doesn't help to influence their eating habits, as they want to eat what you're eating. So you have to model those good eating patterns, which can help you and the child in long-term health. So the child should sit at the table for the meal duration rather than going to play and coming back to the food. And this comes back to setting those boundaries we talked about. Family meals teach healthy habits around food. It can encourage conversation within the family and influence the toddler or young child, especially through modeling healthy behaviors. Include the child in this process by having them help set the table, hold the napkins, or even help prepare some of the dishes. Getting the child involved can get them excited about the meal they helped prepare. And remember, the caregiver provides the location of the meal, the timing, and the food options. The child then decides what foods to eat and how much. Letting the child choose quantity ensures the child is recognizing and honoring their innate hunger and fullness signals. And by allowing the child to decide which foods they eat, the caregiver can increase their exposure to new foods without negatively associating food with pressure feeding. So resources with this presentation include the Mealtime Boundaries flyer to help you remember some of these boundaries we talked about. It also includes a food demo, Cooking with Kids, where you can follow along and learn how to make pizza with your kids. And then the challenge will include information on how to learn what you, to use what you learned this week and challenge you to cook with your kids. Thank you so much for watching.